The hostel was on the edge of the tourist strip, 3 blocks off Union Square, in a building that used to be something else in the 50s and never fully let go of it. I worked the night desk, 10 at night to 6 in the morning, 4 shifts a week, cash tips split with the cleaner if anyone tipped, which they mostly didn't. June of 2021 was a strange time to be running a front desk in San Francisco. Half the city was still shut down. The hostel had been closed for almost a year and had only just reopened, with plastic dividers at the counter and a stack of masks that nobody actually took. Occupancy was maybe 30%. Most of the guests were road trippers who'd driven in from Nevada or Arizona, plus the odd guy who was clearly living out of the place because it was cheaper than a monthly. The group came in on a Sunday night, around 11, 6 of them. They booked the whole 6-bed dorm on the second floor, paid in cash, one payment for all 6, handed over by a woman in her 40s who looked like a substitute teacher, middle-aged, glasses, a purple windbreaker with the tag still on it. She smiled at me the way you smile when you're trying to remember if you're supposed to smile. I checked them in. The age range was off. There was a kid who looked maybe 20, a guy in a suit jacket who was easily 50, a woman in her 30s with a huge duffel that clanked when she set it down, 2 men who looked like brothers, one bearded, one clean-shaven, and the woman in the windbreaker who paid. They didn't have any conversation while I processed them. Not the usual, you got the top bunk joke, no bickering about who paid last, no reading of the Wi-Fi code out loud. I slid the printed sheet across the counter, and the older guy in the jacket picked it up, glanced at it, and typed something into his phone. The kid pulled out his phone half a second later, read whatever came through, nodded once, and walked toward the stairs. I didn't think much of it that first night. Groups come through weird. Church trips, sober living groups, film school kids who hate each other by day 3. I logged them in the book and went back to my crossword. The second day I was on again. Shift started at 10. Around midnight, the woman with the duffel came down for water, and I said, "Hey," and she said, "Hey back," totally normal, asked me if the coffee machine ran all night. I told her, yeah. She thanked me and went back up. Half an hour later, the kid came down for the same thing, and we had almost the same exchange. He asked if there was a laundromat nearby. I pointed him at the one on post. He said thanks, went upstairs. Neither of them mentioned that the other had just been down. That's the thing I kept coming back to later. If you're sharing a room with 5 people, and one of them just went to get water, you'd say something like, "Oh, she said the coffee's on," or "Did she find the mugs?" He didn't. He just came down and did the same errand 5 minutes behind her like he had no idea she'd been there. Third day, I started paying attention on purpose. I could see the door of their dorm from the desk if I leaned back in my chair. They came and went in 1s and 2s, never all together. When 2 of them passed each other in the hallway, they didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't do the little grunt of acknowledgement strangers do in a hostel corridor at 2 in the morning. They moved around each other like people on a sidewalk, but their phones were constantly out. I watched the bearded guy sit in the little lounge across from my desk for maybe 40 minutes one night, drinking a tea, typing, not scrolling, typing. Every so often he'd look up at nothing and then back down. Twice, while he was there, I saw the light in the dorm room flick on and off through the gap under the door, like someone up there was answering. Individually, they were fine, polite even. The older guy in the jacket asked me on the 3rd night if I could recommend a place that did a decent breakfast burrito, and we had a whole 2-minute conversation about a taqueria on Taylor. He was warm. He made a joke about the price of eggs. When he walked away, I remember thinking he seemed like somebody's uncle. Then he passed the woman in the windbreaker on the stairs, and it was like they were made of glass to each other. I want to be honest about what I told myself at the time. I thought maybe they'd had a fight, some kind of falling out, and they were stuck sharing a room because of a booking, and the deal was they'd tolerate it but not talk. That happens. Or maybe it was a language thing. Or maybe some kind of religious silence, though none of them looked the type. I ran through options because the alternative was that something was actually wrong, and I didn't want to sit at a desk from 10 to 6 with the feeling that something was actually wrong. 4th night, Wednesday, slow shift, only 2 other rooms occupied, both by solo travelers who'd already turned in. I was reading something on my phone around 2 in the morning when I heard the stairs. It was the kid, the youngest one. He was in socks, no shoes, hoodie zipped up to his throat. He came all the way to the counter and stood there for a second, and then he leaned in and spoke, quiet, like he didn't want the walls to hear him. "Don't ask us anything. It's safer for you that way." That was it. He didn't wait for a reaction. He turned around and went back up the stairs. I heard the door of the dorm open and close very softly. I sat there for a long time. The desk lamp was making a little humming sound I'd never noticed before. The heater kicked on. I could smell the coffee I'd forgotten about, burned into the bottom of the pot. I didn't call anyone. I didn't do anything. I finished the shift, I did the 6 a.m. handover with the morning girl, I walked home and slept badly, and came back that night and they were still there. Still 6 of them, still not talking. On the 5th day, I did one thing, only one. I have a friend from high school who ended up SFPD, works out of a station up near the Panhandle. We text maybe twice a year, mostly about football. I wrote out a description of the 6 of them, everything I could remember. Ages, rough heights, the jacket, the duffel, the way the woman in the windbreaker held her purse tucked under her arm like it was welded there. I said, off the record, weird group at my work. Can you just look and see if anything pings? I also sent 2 photos I'd pulled off the security camera above the entrance. The camera was old, and the images were grainy, but you could make out faces. He wrote back the next afternoon, just, call me from a number that isn't yours. I bought a prepaid at a Walgreens on Geary and called him from the alley behind it. He picked up on the second ring. He didn't say hi. He asked me if the group was still there. I said yes. He asked if I told anyone else about them, co-workers, my manager, anyone. I said no. He was quiet for a second, and then he said, 3 of the faces you sent me are people who aren't supposed to be findable. They're witnesses on an open case out of state. The other 3 are the people looking after them. This is not something I'm supposed to be telling you, and I'm not going to explain it. Delete our messages, delete the photos, don't ask them anything, don't stare at them. Do your job like it's a normal week. If they ask you something, answer normally. When they leave, forget you saw them. I said okay. He said, I'm serious. You don't want to be a loose thread in this. Neither do I. I said okay again. He hung up. I walked back to my apartment and I did what he said. I deleted the thread. I deleted the photos from my camera roll and from the cloud. I broke the prepaid in half and dropped the pieces in 2 different trash cans on the way home. I felt stupid doing it, and I did it anyway. They checked out the next morning, before my shift started. The day girl said they left in 2 separate cars from 2 separate pickups, 20 minutes apart. The older guy in the jacket paid the balance, tipped her $40, told her the beds were comfortable. Nobody in the group said goodbye to any of the others in the lobby. She said she noticed because it felt rude. I still worked at the hostel for another 8 months. I never told anyone. Not my manager, not the morning girl, not the cleaner who I actually liked. I didn't Google anything. I didn't look up open cases in other states. I didn't want to know what the 3 of them had seen or who wanted them not to have seen it. The only thing I did, and I'm not proud of this, was that on nights when it was slow, I'd sometimes catch myself looking at the door of the 2nd floor dorm and wondering whether they'd made it to wherever they were going after San Francisco, whether the kid in the hoodie was somewhere else now, in another hostel, in another city, sitting in another lobby with 5 people he wasn't allowed to speak to. Then I'd stop, because wondering is a form of asking, and I'd been told not to ask. The first email came in on a Sunday night, September 15th, around 11:40 p.m. I was at my desk on the 8th floor of a building on West 40th, half eating a bagel from the deli downstairs, pretending to edit a Monday morning piece about the Fed's upcoming meeting. The subject line was empty. No sender name, just a string of numbers before the ad and a domain I didn't recognize. 2 lines in the body. Brent crude opens up nearly 20% tomorrow. Saudi Aramco facilities hit overnight. That was it. No signature, no follow-up. I remember laughing. Not out loud, just this small exhale through my nose. We got tips like that all the time. Guys who thought they'd crack something, guys who'd read a Twitter thread and decided they were oracles. I dragged it into the junk folder and went home around 1. At 4 a.m., I got a Slack ping from my editor. Drone strike on Abqaiq. Half of Saudi oil production offline. Brent was already up 15% in overnight trading and climbing. By the time markets opened in New York, we were pushing 20. I sat on the subway that morning and thought about that email maybe 3 times. Not more. Coincidence. Someone with a State Department cousin, maybe, who guessed lucky. That's what I told myself walking up out of the 42nd Street station. Then Tuesday night, around the same time, the second one came. Overnight repo rate hits 10% tomorrow. Fed intervenes by mid-morning. I read it twice. The repo market wasn't a thing anyone outside our industry cared about. It wasn't sexy. You couldn't put it in a headline that would move. And 10% was insane. That number belonged in a 2008 flashback, not a Tuesday in September. I didn't sleep well. I kept the tab open. I told my wife I was reading, and I was, but only that one screen. The next morning, the overnight repo rate blew up to almost 10%. Fed jumped in with $75 billion in operations by lunch. Every reporter I knew was scrambling. My editor came over to my desk and asked if I had a source who could explain what happened. I said no. I was staring at that email in my folder. By Thursday, I had a folder just for them. I labeled it MISC. It felt stupid to give it a real name. The third email came Thursday night. Impeachment inquiry announced next week. Financials sell off Wednesday afternoon. That one I sat with for a long time. It wasn't a market rumor. It was politics. And Pelosi had been holding the line for months, refusing every push from her own caucus. There was no version of the news cycle I was reading that suggested she'd flip. She flipped that Tuesday. Announcement Wednesday afternoon. Financials sold off into the close. I stopped calling it coincidence around then. Here's the part I still don't have a clean way to explain. I could have written any of it. Not the tip itself, obviously not. I got an email that said, but the underlying story. I had my beat. I had contacts. I could have used the timing to make a call, get a quote, frame a piece the night before, sit on it until morning. I'd have been first on 3 of the biggest stories of the fall. I didn't, not once. I don't fully know why. Part of it was fear. If I ran a piece 12 hours before an event that specific, someone at the SEC was going to ask me who I talked to, and I didn't have a name to give them. Part of it was that I kept expecting the streak to break. Every email felt like the last one that would be right. I'd wait for the miss, and the miss would be the proof it had all been random, and I could stop paying attention. The miss never came. By early October, I could tell when a new one was landing before I opened it. My phone would sit on the nightstand a certain way, screen down, and I'd wake up around 11:35 and just know. I'd go to the kitchen, make coffee I didn't need, and check my laptop at the counter with the light off. Peloton IPO opens below the offer price. WeWork pulls the S1 by end of week. Fed cuts 25 basis points on the 30th. Everyone, right down to the hour sometimes. I stopped looking for a pattern in the sender. I'd tried it first. The domains changed, the number strings changed. Nothing bounced when I replied, but nothing ever answered either. I sent one message in mid-October that just said, "Why me?" No response. I wasn't really expecting one. My wife noticed I was quieter. She asked if something was going on at work. I said the market was weird, which was true, and left it there. I didn't tell her about the folder. I didn't tell anyone. My editor once joked that I looked like I'd seen a ghost every time I came in. I laughed and said the coffee downstairs had gotten worse. There was one night in late October when I almost broke. The email had come in around midnight. Fed cut 2 days out, specific language about mid-cycle adjustment going away from the statement. I sat at my kitchen table with a Word doc open and I wrote 3 paragraphs. Careful ones. Nothing that would give me away. Just a piece framed around sources familiar with the discussion. I stared at it for maybe 40 minutes. Then I closed the document without saving. I don't remember making the decision. I remember standing up and putting the mug in the sink and going to bed. The last email came on November 14th. Aramco IPO priced at the low end. Trades flat on debut. That was it. Same format. No goodbye, no shift in tone, nothing that suggested it was the last one. I only knew it was the last one because after that, there was nothing. I waited up the next night. Nothing. The night after. Nothing. A week. 2 weeks. I kept checking for a month. I told my wife I had trouble sleeping and started taking melatonin. What I was really doing was waking up at 11:35 and refreshing an inbox that had gone dead. I don't know how to describe the feeling of it stopping. It wasn't relief, it wasn't fear either. It was more like the sound of a fridge you didn't realize was running until it clicks off. The apartment was suddenly quieter in a way I couldn't get used to. For a while I thought maybe whoever it was had died, or gotten caught, or moved on to some other reporter who'd actually run with the tips. I checked every byline I could think of for weeks looking for the tell, the piece that came in a beat too early. I never found one. And then sometime in December, sitting at my desk with the lights off and everyone gone home, I noticed something I should have noticed months earlier. Every event in that folder had happened, every single one, but none of them had been called before I got the email. Not on the wires, not in a research note, not in some private Discord where a hedge fund analyst had bragged. I went back through the archives. The repo spike caught everyone off guard. Peloton's debut was in a range, sure, but nobody had it opening below the offer. Pelosi's turn on impeachment surprised her own leadership. The information wasn't wrong, it just wasn't early to reality. It was only early to the rest of us finding out. That's the part that stayed with me, not the who, though I'd have paid a lot to know the who. It was the fact that all of it happened anyway. My folder didn't change one price by 1 cent. If I deleted every email the second it arrived, September through November would have unspooled the same way. Oil up, repo blown out, WeWork gutted, Fed cutting, Aramco flat. Someone, somewhere, had known. Not guessed, known. And instead of moving markets with it, or profiting off it in any way I could see, they'd sent it to a mid-list reporter at a mid-list financial paper who did nothing with it. For 2 months. And then stopped. I've turned that over a lot of times. The most generous read is that it was a test. Somebody wanted to see if a reporter with that kind of edge would use it, and I failed or passed depending on which side of that person's line I fell on. The less generous read is that it wasn't about me at all, that I was one of 100 people getting those emails, and the sender was just watching to see which of us moved first. I don't know. I still don't know. I changed jobs the following spring, not because of it. That's what I tell myself. Different building, different email system. I don't wake up at 11:35 anymore. Most nights. Sometimes, on Sunday nights especially, I'll refresh the old inbox out of habit. There's never anything there. Just the folder, still labeled MISC, still sitting where I left it. I haven't opened it in years. I haven't deleted it either. The call center was on the second floor of an office park off Shadeland Avenue, sandwiched between a shuttered Bed Bath & Beyond and a payday loan place. I worked nights, 10 to 6, August of 2022. Indianapolis in August is like breathing through a wet sock, and the parking lot at that hour smelled like hot asphalt and the dumpster behind the Panda Express next door. I want to talk about the job because I still think about it, and because a bunch of stuff got shaken loose later that I didn't really expect. You've probably called a place like this before. Your internet drops, your router blinks orange, you dial the number on the fridge magnet, and you get someone like me. My headset was one of those cheap Plantronics ones the company bought in bulk, and by the third hour of a shift, the little foam pad would soak through with sweat behind my ear. The script was normal at first. Greet the customer, verify the account, run the line test, walk them through unplugging the modem for 30 seconds. Standard stuff. I could do it half asleep, and by month 2, I basically was. The upsell part came later. They rolled it out in April. Every ticket, whether the issue was resolved or not, had to end with what they called a value conversation. That was the term in the training deck. You resolve the outage? Great, now you pivot. Faster speed tier, whole home Wi-Fi, premium tech support subscription for $9.99 a month that basically just meant you got moved to a shorter hold queue next time. Streaming bundle. Home phone add-on. In 2022, I'm not kidding. Everyone had a conversion quota. Ours was 14%. If you dipped under that 2 weeks in a row, you got a coaching. 3 coachings, and you were done. My team lead was a guy named Devin, mid-30s, chewed toothpicks because he'd quit smoking, and he had this way of leaning on the back of your chair while you took a call so you could feel him breathing over your shoulder. He wasn't cruel. He just needed his numbers to look good to the guy above him, who needed his numbers to look good to corporate. The problem wasn't the upsell itself. Selling stuff is selling stuff. The problem was who was calling in at 2 a.m. old people, almost every night, old people. They'd call because their email wouldn't load, or because the little green light on the box was red, or because their grandkid had set up something on the TV last Christmas and now it wasn't working. They didn't know what a router was. Half of them didn't know what megabits were. They just wanted the internet to work again so they could check their bank account in the morning. And the script told me, after I fixed it, to offer them the 200 meg upgrade, the premium support plan, the whole thing. There was a woman I remember specifically. She had a soft voice, kind of a Kentucky accent under the Indiana one. Her name in the system was Margaret. She'd called because her Wi-Fi had been out for 2 days, and her son, who usually helps her, was in Fort Wayne for work. I got her back online in about 6 minutes. It was a modem reset, then I did the pivot. I hated myself while I did it, but I did it because Devin was standing 4 cubicles down looking at the queue board. I told her about the premium support tier. I said it would mean faster help next time. Priority queue, 24/7 concierge. I used the word concierge because it was in the script. She said, "Oh honey, I don't know what any of that means, but if it means the internet won't go out again, then yes, that sounds fine." I signed her up. $12.99 a month, on top of what she was already paying. I sat there after the call ended and just stared at the screen. My mouse hand felt like it wasn't mine. Somebody at the far end of the floor was microwaving fish, and the smell drifted over the low cubicle walls. And I thought about my grandmother, who had died 2 years earlier, and how she would have said the exact same thing Margaret said. I went into her account the next night and canceled it. Backdated the cancellation to the day before so no charge would hit. Left a note that said, "Customer requested cancellation, retention offer declined." Nobody looked at retention notes. It was a small enough action that it wouldn't get flagged. I did it again the next week. A man named Harold, 78, signed up for the streaming bundle after a 5-minute call about his printer, which we don't even support. I canceled that too. Then a woman whose account had 3 different add-ons stacked on it, each one from a different late-night call over the past 6 months. She lived on Social Security. Her bill had crept up to almost $200 a month. I couldn't reverse the old charges from my seat, but I stripped the current add-ons and left the note. By July, I had a running list in a spiral notebook I kept in my car. Not on any company machine, not on my phone, just a notebook in the glove compartment. Account numbers, dates, what got sold, what I reversed. I didn't fully know why I was keeping it yet. I told myself it was so I could keep track if anything came back on me. Devin pulled me into a coaching in mid-July. My conversion rate was 8%. He asked what was going on. I said the calls had been running long, lots of complex tickets, hard to pivot. He nodded like he'd heard that excuse before, which he had. Everyone said it. He said, "Look, man, I like you, but 8 is not gonna fly for August. You gotta get to 14. I said I'd work on it. The thing I didn't tell him was that I'd started listening to old recordings. Every call was recorded. Every agent could pull up their own recent calls under quality review. But if you clicked around in the QA tool a certain way, you could pull other agents' calls too. It wasn't secret. It was just not advertised. I found it by accident one slow night looking for a call I thought was mine, and turned out to be somebody else's with a similar timestamp. I started pulling calls involving customers over 70. You could sort of tell from the voice, and I'd verify by checking the DOB field. I listened to maybe 40 of them over 2 weeks whenever the floor was dead. Half of them were fine. Reps did the pivot, customer said no thanks, call ended, normal. The other half were not fine. There was a call where a rep, I won't say his name, kept pressing an old man who clearly had some kind of memory issue. The man kept saying, "I already have that, don't I? I think I have that." And the rep kept saying, "No sir, this is a new service, this is different, this is better." And the man eventually said, "Okay," because he was tired and confused and just wanted off the phone. That call was 17 minutes long. The upsell portion was 11 of them. There was another one where a woman was crying because her husband had just gone into hospice and she couldn't figure out how to get the TV working in his room. The rep resolved the issue, then offered her a whole home mesh upgrade. She said yes. She said yes to everything. I could hear it in her voice. She would have said yes to anything to get off the call. I started writing down call IDs, timestamps. Which agents? I wasn't targeting the agents. Half of them were kids paying rent, doing what Devin told them to do. It was the pattern I wanted. In early August, I typed up what I had. I used the FTC complaint form on their website, the one for deceptive practices and unauthorized charges. I gave specific examples, called out specific call IDs, described the quota structure and the coaching pressure. I didn't sign my full name, but I gave enough that they could contact me if they wanted. I sent a similar version to the Indiana Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. Then I went to work that night and took my calls like nothing happened. Nothing happened for about 3 weeks. I honestly figured it went into a pile. I put in my notice on August 22nd. I'd gotten a job at a hospital IT help desk that paid $2 more an hour and didn't have a conversion quota. Devin was disappointed but not surprised. He shook my hand and said if I ever wanted to come back, the door was open. I said thanks. My last shift was a Thursday. I didn't take the notebook out of my glove compartment for a month. Then in November, I was scrolling the Indy Star on my phone during lunch, and there was an article. State AG's office, joint with the FTC, had opened a formal investigation into the company's sales practices, specifically calling out night shift upsells to elderly customers. The article said the investigation had started based on a complaint from a former employee and had been corroborated by call recordings the regulators subpoenaed. The company issued a statement about how they were cooperating fully and had always maintained the highest standards of customer service. I read it twice, sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage, and then I put the phone down on the passenger seat and just sat there for a minute with the engine off. I don't know exactly how it ended. I mean, I know they got fined. That was in the news 6 months later. A settlement, some number of millions, no admission of wrongdoing, the usual. I don't know if Margaret got her money back. Probably not. Probably she never even knew any of it happened. She just noticed 1 month that her bill was a little lower and figured maybe she'd remembered wrong about what she was paying. The notebook is still in my glove compartment. I never threw it out. I don't look at it either. It's just there, under the registration and the ice scraper I never take out even in July. Sometimes at the hospital I get a call from an older patient's family, confused about a portal login, and I catch myself softening my voice a little more than I used to. Taking an extra minute, not pivoting to anything after, that's about it. That's the whole thing. Thanks so much for watching this video. I'd love to hear which story was your favorite, so drop it in the comments below. And if you want more scary stories like this, check out the other vids on the channel. Until next time, bye.